The Vorkarian broodmother cast it aside without a second glance. Unwanted, useless, tiny Lita's fate was sealed, a quick death in the cold vacuum of space. Until Michael saw her. A warship, vast and obsidian, hung motionless against the star-dusted canvas. No lights blinked, no comm signals pulsed, only the faintest distortion in the surrounding space betrayed its presence. It was a silent predator, a monument to Vorkarian efficiency and ruthless pragmatism. From a hidden bay in its underbelly, a small, egg-shaped escape pod was ejected. It tumbled away, a lonely speck against the immensity of space, its trajectory erratic, uncontrolled. A death sentence delivered with cold indifference. Inside the pod, Lita, a Vorkarian infant, lay unconscious. Her skin, a pale lavender, was clammy. She was small, even for a newborn, a runt in a species that prized strength above all else. Scratched and gouged marks marred the Vorkarian script on the pod's exterior, as if someone had desperately tried to erase her identity. On a nearby space station, a patchwork of welded metal and repurposed technology, Michael Walker wrestled with a stubborn hull panel. Sparks showered around him, momentarily illuminating his face etched with lines of weariness, his eyes holding a deep-seated sadness. The clang of metal echoed through the station's cramped corridors, a lonely symphony in the vast emptiness. He tightened a bolt, the servo whine of his wrench a familiar comfort. Each movement was slow, deliberate, as if the simple act of repairing the station was a burden he carried with him. Suddenly, a shrill alarm blared from his console, cutting through the mechanical drone. Red lights flashed, painting the grimy walls in a pulsating crimson. Unauthorized object detected, a synthesized voice announced, its tone flat and emotionless. Michael sighed, his shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly. Another piece of space junk, another potential hull breach. He glanced at the monitor, his gaze lingering on the escape pod's trajectory, a collision course with Section 7, right near his location. "Great," he muttered, his voice raspy from recycled air and too many silent hours. He ran a quick calculation, his fingers flying across the console's worn surface. The pod was small, but its velocity was high. Impact could rupture the outer hull, depressurize the section. With a renewed sense of purpose, his movements became precise, efficient. The weariness seemed to fade, replaced by the ingrained reflexes of a seasoned mechanic. He activated the station's tractor beam controls, his fingers dancing over the ancient interface. "Come on, baby, don't fail me now," he murmured, coaxing the aging system to life. The tractor beam snared the pod, a shimmering blue tendril reaching out across the void. Slowly, painstakingly, Michael guided it away from the station's vulnerable hull, pulling it towards docking bay 4. The magnetic clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk, sealing the pod within the bay. He cycled the airlock, the hiss of escaping atmosphere filling the small space. Stepping inside the docking bay, he approached the pod cautiously. The scratch markings were even more visible up close, a crude act of defacement. With a groan of protesting metal, the pod's hatch swung open. Inside, Lita lay still, her small chest barely rising and falling. Michael reached out, his calloused fingers gently touching her lavender skin. It was cold, too cold. A wave of nausea washed over him. He checked the pod's diagnostics. The life support systems were failing, the oxygen levels plummeting. A warning klaxon pulsed, a frantic death knell. He had minutes, maybe seconds. Memories flashed through his mind, a tiny hand gripping his finger, a soft giggle echoing in a sunlit room. A child's drawing, crooked and colorful, taped to the refrigerator. Images of a life stolen too soon. His own daughter lost to a rare and aggressive virus. The guilt, the helplessness, the crushing weight of grief. He forced the memories down, shoving them back into the locked box in his heart. There wasn't time for that now. He knew the station's infirmary was small, barely equipped, but it was all he had. He remembered seeing a few vials of broad-spectrum antibiotics, some nutrient paste, a basic oxygenator. Nothing specifically for Vorkarians. If he didn't act, the infant would suffocate. But how could he, a simple mechanic, hope to save an alien child with medical needs completely foreign to him? He stared at the tiny, still form, the failing life support humming its mournful song. He was just a mechanic, not a miracle worker. But in those fragile, fading moments, looking at the abandoned child, Michael knew he had to try. Transferred. Michael barely registered the automated voice as he slammed the infirmary door open with his shoulder. The room was a relic, a forgotten corner of the station's original human design. Peeling paint revealed layers of forgotten directives, and the air hung thick with the metallic tang of stale disinfectant. A single, flickering fluorescent tube cast long, dancing shadows across the room, illuminating rows of empty supply cabinets and a rusted examination table. His breath hitched. He needed to work fast. He laid Lita gently on the cold metal, his fingers flying over her tiny form, searching for any sign of immediate trauma. Her breathing was shallow and erratic, almost non-existent. He grabbed a dusty oxygen mask from a nearby cabinet, its rubber cracked and brittle. It was far too large. Cursing under his breath, he rummaged through a drawer overflowing with discarded tubing and connectors. He found a small, flexible hose and with a few swift cuts and jury-rigged connections, fashioned a makeshift adapter. He pressed the modified mask to Lita's face, his heart pounding in his chest. He needed warmth too. The station's environmental controls were set for human comfort, far too cold for a newborn anything. He tore open a sterile pack of bandages and began wrapping Lita, creating a cocoon of insulation. Then, scavenging parts from a broken incubator in the corner, he managed to reroute power and coax a weak heat source back to life, creating a makeshift haven from the cold. He glanced at the station's antiquated computer terminal. Maybe, just maybe, there was something in the archives. He punched in a series of commands, his fingers flying across the sticky keys. Nothing. Vorkarian physiology, he muttered, trying different spellings, different databases. Still nothing. The station's records were woefully incomplete, a testament to its forgotten status. Panic flared. He had no idea what Lita needed. He watched her chest rise and fall, a shallow, uneven rhythm. Then he noticed a faint mottling spreading across her skin, a subtle shift from pale gray to a sickly, blotchy purple, allergic reaction. The human oxygen mixture was killing her. He ripped the mask away, his mind racing. He needed to filter the air, remove whatever element was triggering the reaction. The station's life support system. It was old but functional. He scrambled out of the infirmary and down the narrow corridor, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He located the main air filtration unit, a massive, humming machine that filled half the room. He bypassed the standard filters, rerouting the airflow through a series of makeshift charcoal filters and water scrubbers he cobbled together from spare parts. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all he had. Back in the infirmary, he reactivated the modified oxygen mask, the air now cleaner, purer. He watched Lita intently, his brow furrowed with concern. The mottling seemed to slow, but it didn't disappear completely. Now, nourishment. He had no idea what Vorkarians ate or what their infants required. He grabbed a beaker and began mixing various nutrient solutions, drawing from the station's limited supply of protein concentrates, amino acids, and glucose. He diluted the mixture with purified water, creating a thin, milky fluid. He carefully filled a modified syringe, its needle imbued with a soft, flexible tube. He gently inserted the tube into Lita's mouth, his hand trembling. He depressed the plunger slowly, cautiously. She swallowed weakly, her tiny throat bobbing. He monitored her vital signs, his eyes glued to the flickering display on the incubator. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then slowly, the mottling began to fade. Her skin regained its normal grayish hue. Her breathing deepened, becoming more regular. She stirred weakly, her tiny limbs twitching. Relief washed over him, so potent it almost brought him to his knees. Days blurred into a relentless cycle of feeding, cleaning, and monitoring. Michael neglected his repair duties, his tools gathering dust in the corner. He learned to recognize Lita's distinct vocalizations, a high-pitched whine for hunger, a low gurgle for contentment, a sharp squeak for discomfort. He adjusted the incubator's temperature, tweaked the air filtration system, and experimented with different nutrient mixtures, each adjustment based on careful observation and desperate guesswork. Lita began to respond to his touch, her tiny hand gripping his finger with surprising strength. She would turn her head towards his voice, her large, black eyes focusing on his face. He found himself talking to her, rambling about his past, about the station, about the stars outside. He told her about his daughter, lost too soon, a wound that time had failed to heal. He spoke of his hopes for her, for a life free from the cruelty and indifference of the galaxy. The speaker above his head crackled to life, jolting him from his reverie. A garbled voice filled the infirmary, speaking in the harsh, guttural tones of the Vorkarian language. Then in broken, heavily accented galactic standard, a request, space station, identification, request, docking, permission. Michael froze, his blood turning to ice. Vorkarians here. He glanced at the incubator where Lita slept peacefully, oblivious to the danger that had arrived. His mind raced. Where to hide her? Every corner of the station felt transparent, exposed. His own cramped living quarters were out of the question, too personal, too easily searched. That left. The seldom used storage compartment near the auxiliary power conduits. Damp, dusty, but potentially secure. Michael moved with a frantic, quiet energy. He practically threw aside discarded cables and empty coolant canisters within the storage area, clearing a space just large enough for the repurposed incubator. Dust motes danced in the dim emergency lighting, catching in his throat. He ripped a section of flexible ducting from a broken ventilation unit, rigging a makeshift system to provide Lita with fresh air. It was crude, barely functional, but it was all he had. He lifted the incubator, his arms trembling with the effort. Lita stirred within, her large eyes blinking slowly. "Almost there, little one," he whispered, his voice catching. He gently placed the incubator in the prepared space, securing the hatch with a rusty bolt and masking it with a pile of discarded equipment. From the outside, it looked like just another collection of junk. He took a shaky breath, wiping sweat from his brow. Time to play the part. Michael hurried to the station's comms console, forcing himself to adopt a calm, professional demeanor. He hailed the Vorkarian ship. "Vorkarian vessel, this is Station Sigma 7, please respond." A curt, guttural voice crackled through the comms. "Sigma 7, this is Captain Vorak of the warship Claw of Xantus. State your operational status and crew manifest." Michael swallowed hard. "Station is fully operational, crew manifest. One human, Michael Walker, station mechanic." He omitted any mention of a rescued Vorkarian infant, feeling beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the chill in the station. "Acknowledge," Vorak's voice responded, filled with something Michael couldn't quite decipher but felt like suspicion. "Stand by for docking procedure." Michael killed the connection, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had to prepare. He glanced around the main control room, his eyes scanning for anything he could use. A heavy wrench, a discarded plasma torch, basic tools, but better than nothing. He concealed them behind a console panel, ready to be deployed if necessary. The station shuddered as the Vorkarian ship docked, a boarding party. He could feel it in his bones. He hurried to the airlock, forcing a neutral expression onto his face. The airlock hissed open, and 3 heavily armored Vorkarians strode into the station. The lead Vorkarian, easily 7 feet tall, with scarred features and eyes like chips of obsidian, fixed Michael with a withering stare. He spoke first in Vorkarian, the harsh syllables grating against Michael's ears, then switched to broken English. "Human, you are in charge of this station." Michael nodded, trying to appear subservient. Yes, Captain Michael Walker, station mechanic. We are here for routine inspection, the captain stated, his voice a low growl. To ensure no rogue genetic experiments are being performed. Show us around. Michael forced himself to meet the captain's gaze, feigning ignorance. Of course, Captain. Right this way. His heart hammered against his ribs as he led the Vorkarians away from the storage compartment towards the main areas of the station. They moved through the narrow corridors, the Vorkarians' heavy boots clanging against the metal floor. Michael guided them towards the infirmary, knowing it was the most likely place to raise suspicion. He needed to be prepared with answers. The Vorkarians examined the infirmary equipment with cold, calculating eyes, scrutinizing every detail. The captain questioned Michael about the purpose of each device, his voice sharp and demanding. One of the Vorkarians paused, his gaze fixed on the modified oxygen mask and incubator Michael had used to stabilize Lita. He raised a thick, ridged eyebrow. This equipment, altered, explain. Michael's mind raced. He had to think fast. Just adaptations for human medical emergencies, Captain, he stammered, hoping his voice didn't betray his fear. The station's medical supplies are limited. I had to improvise. The Vorkarian captain stared intently at Michael, his gaze lingering, piercing. He didn't seem convinced. Then his eyes flicked to something on the floor near the incubator. A discarded Vorkarian nutrient packet, its label unmistakable. He slowly bent and picked it up, his obsidian eyes narrowing as he examined it. Nutrient packet designation VX-49, the Vorkarian captain repeated, his chitinous faceplate gleaming under the station's harsh fluorescent lights. His voice, translated through the device on his chest, was a low, guttural rumble. Explain why one of our supply markers was recovered from your station's exterior hull. Michael forced a shrug, trying to appear nonchalant despite the knot tightening in his gut. Inspection team must have dropped it. Happens all the time. This place gets a lot of traffic, you know. He leaned against a stack of crates, attempting to project an air of bored indifference. Anything could have drifted out here. The junior officer, his scaled skin shimmering with barely suppressed impatience, pushed past the captain, his three-fingered hand twitching. We will conduct a more thorough search. Storage area Gamma 7, initiate access. He strode towards the indicated section, his heavy boots clanging on the metal floor. Gamma 7. That's mostly just scrap and outdated equipment, Michael said, raising his voice slightly, trying to steer the Vorkarian away. You won't find anything interesting there. Check out Sector 4, the hydroponics bay. Now that's where the real action is. He gestured vaguely towards the opposite end of the station, attempting to draw their attention away. Inside the hidden compartment, Lita stirred. The makeshift ventilation system, cobbled together from salvaged tubing and a repurposed air purifier, hummed quietly, but the faint gurgling sound she made was almost imperceptible. Almost. Michael's blood ran cold, his ears strained, every nerve ending on high alert. He saw the junior officer's head snap up, his multifaceted eyes focusing on the wall behind Michael. The officer paused, his hand hovering over a stack of discarded coolant rods, his gaze fixed on the hidden access panel. The officer's hand moved, reaching for the recessed hatch release. Wait, Michael blurted out, pushing himself off the crates. That compartment, that's off limits. Safety regulations. Unstable experimental fuel cells, highly volatile, you wouldn't want to be anywhere near them. He stepped forward, placing himself between the officer and the compartment. The captain's brow ridges furrowed, his expression hardening. Fuel cells? I was not informed of any such materials being stored on this station. Show me the manifest. His voice was a low growl infused with suspicion. Michael hesitated, the lie hanging heavy in the air. He had walked right into their trap. The manifest. It's being updated. New regulations, you know how it is. The captain simply nodded to the junior officer. Override the lock. Sir, yes, sir. The junior officer produced a small device from his belt and pressed it against the access panel. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the locking mechanism disengaged. The hatch hissed open, revealing the darkened storage compartment. Michael braced himself, his muscles tensed, ready to defend Lita with everything he had. But the compartment was empty. Except for a few discarded tools and the jury-rigged ventilation system, there was nothing there. No Lita. Michael blinked, feigning surprise. Well, I'll be. Looks like someone helped themselves to the fuel cells. Space pirates, maybe. Happens all the time out here. He spread his hands, trying to appear bewildered. The Vorkarian captain's gaze was unwavering, his eyes narrowed slits. He didn't believe a word of it. Indeed. Just then, a series of rapid clicks emanated from the captain's wrist-mounted comms device. He listened intently, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly. He turned back to Michael. The inspection is concluded. However, he added, his voice permeated with menace, we will be monitoring this station closely for any unauthorized activity. Do not attempt to leave the premises. The Vorkarian boarding party turned and marched back towards their shuttle, their heavy footsteps echoing in the corridor. Michael sagged against the wall as the shuttle doors hissed shut and the vessel disengaged from the station. He let out a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair. Where had Lita gone? As he was contemplating this question, a coded message alert pinged on his private comm channel. He activated it, his heart pounding in his chest. A distorted voice, heavily modulated, spoke 3 words. We know, Runt, help, rendezvous. Michael tightened the straps on Lita's carrier, a repurposed environmental suit backpack modified with scavenged Vorkarian tech. The soft whir of its internal life support was a fragile counterpoint to the station's groaning metal bones. He double-checked the oxygen levels, his fingers lingering on the cool polymer. Trust strangers. The thought gnawed at him. He pushed it down, focusing on the map Anya's contact had sent, etched onto a salvaged data chip. Lita gurgled softly, her 3 eyes blinking up at him. He offered a small, reassuring smile. Almost there, little one. He moved with a practiced shuffle, hugging the shadows of the station's less-traveled corridors. Condensation dripped from corroded pipes, each drop echoing in the oppressive silence. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of decaying machinery and the faint, acrid scent of ozone. Decades of neglect had turned these passageways into a labyrinth, but Michael knew them intimately. Knew the rhythm of the failing generators, the blind spots in the surveillance grid, the emergency access panels that led to nowhere and everywhere. The rendezvous point, Cargo Bay 7, a cavernous space rarely used since the Vorkarian influx. Michael paused at the entrance, his hand hovering over the access panel. The bay was silent, the vast metal doors sealed tight, too quiet. He keyed in the override code, the panel hissing open with a reluctant groan. He stepped inside, Lita nestled securely against his back, his pulse quickening. The bay was empty. Walker. A voice, low and raspy, cut through the silence. It came from above. Michael tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for the discarded plasma cutter he'd jury-rigged into a makeshift weapon. Easy, the voice said. Anya sent me. I'm no friend of the Vorkarians. A figure dropped from the shadows of the gantry crane, landing with a muffled thud. A woman, human, weathered face, close-cropped gray hair, and eyes that had seen too much. She wore a patched-up station jumpsuit and carried herself with the wary confidence of a cornered animal. Anya said you had something. Precious. Her gaze softened as she saw the carrier. Lita, Michael said, his grip on the plasma cutter easing slightly. We haven't much time, the woman said, gesturing towards the back of the bay. They're tightening their grip on the station. Anya and the others are waiting. Name's Jess. Jess led Michael to a section of the wall that appeared seamless. She ran her hand along a barely perceptible seam, then pressed a sequence of rivets. With a grinding rumble, a section of the wall slid inward, revealing a narrow passage. The air within was stale and damp, carrying the faint scent of mildew. After you, Jess said, her eyes flicking nervously towards the entrance. The passage snaked through the station's infrastructure, the walls closing in until Michael felt like he was crawling through the guts of a dying beast. Lita remained silent, seemingly unfazed by the cramped conditions. Finally, the passage opened into a vast, unexpected space, a hydroponics bay. Rows upon rows of glowing plants filled the air with a humid, earthy scent, a vibrant oasis in the cold, sterile environment of the station. Water trickled through intricate irrigation systems, and the gentle hum of hydroponic pumps filled the air. People moved among the plants, tending to the crops, their faces illuminated by the soft, artificial light. Humans, yes, but also a motley collection of aliens, a grell with iridescent skin, a hulking Krog with bioluminescent markings, and several others he couldn't immediately identify, all united by a shared wariness, a quiet defiance in their eyes. Anya stood at the far end of the bay, her face etched with concern. She hurried towards them, her steps quick but deliberate. "Michael, you made it." And Lita, she reached out a hand, then hesitated, as if unsure how to approach the infant. "Welcome to the Forgotten Garden," Agrell said, his voice a series of melodic clicks and whistles, translated by a small device on his chest. "A place where the Vorkarians choose not to see." "We've been monitoring Vorkarian activity on this station for years," Anya explained, her voice low and urgent. "We've seen what they do, the culling, they call it, a brutal process of genetic selection." She gestured towards a holographic display showing complex genetic diagrams and statistical analyses. "We study them, hoping to find a way to fight back." The display shifted, showing a series of Vorkarian genetic markers, each identified by a complex alphanumeric code. "These markers," Anya explained, "indicate undesirable traits, weakness, illness, anything that deviates from their ideal. They use this information to identify and eliminate those they deem unfit." The display zoomed in on a specific marker, highlighting its role in determining physical resilience. The ruthlessness of it was clear. Michael felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. Another display showed a vast database filled with the genetic profiles of countless Vorkarians, a chilling testament to their systematic eugenics program. "It's barbaric," Michael said, his voice tight with disgust. He looked down at Lita, nestled securely in her carrier, her three eyes blinking innocently. "They would have just killed her." Anya placed a hand on his arm, her grip firm. "They will if they find her. The Vorkarians are likely to increase their surveillance of the station. It will be harder to stay hidden." The group gathered around a makeshift table, covered in maps and data chips. A low hum of voices filled the air as they began to brainstorm ideas, searching for ways to counteract Vorkarian tracking methods, to create a long-term plan for Lita's safety. "There's a rumor," Anya said, leaning forward, her voice barely a whisper, "of a hidden Vorkarian research facility somewhere in this sector. A place where they conduct genetic experiments. If it exists, it could hold vital information about Lita's survival, and maybe a way to stop them." Michael's gaze hardened. "I'll go," he said, his voice resolute. "I'll investigate the facility. A chance to protect Lita, a chance to strike back." Anya studied him for a moment, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and respect. "It's a suicide mission, Michael." "Then I guess I'm volunteering," he replied. Anya nodded slowly. "All right, Jess, you're with him. Krell, start gathering intel. We need everything we can get." As the group dispersed, preparing for the mission, Michael stared out at the hydroponic garden, the vibrant green a stark contrast to the cold, metal walls of the station. He thought of Lita, safe for now but vulnerable. He knew the risks were enormous. Failure meant death, not just for him but for her. Anya approached him, her expression grim. "There's one more thing you should know about the research facility," she said, her voice low. "Infiltrating it will require assuming Vorkarian identities. We have some experimental disguise technology, but it's risky." "Very risky." A bio-engineered skin graft, Anya continued, her voice calm despite the gravity of the situation, designed to temporarily rewrite your genetic markers and physical appearance to match that of a Vorkarian soldier. She tapped a control on the holographic display, rotating the image of a wiry, green-skinned Vorkarian. The graft interfaces directly with your DNA, altering bone structure, skin pigmentation, even minor organ functions. It's comprehensive. Michael frowned. Comprehensive sounds invasive. It is, Anya admitted, her gaze steady. And it's still experimental. We've run simulations, of course, but there's a risk of rejection. Minor tissue damage at worst. But there's also the potential for unforeseen side effects, headaches, disorientation, and in rare cases more profound psychological disturbances. Rex shifted his weight, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Psychological disturbances, like what? Personality bleed, Anya said, her voice dropping slightly. The graft's influence on the brain can sometimes blur the lines. Individuals have, on occasion, exhibited Vorkarian behavioral traits, aggression, heightened territoriality. Michael's eyes narrowed. How long does this disguise last? Approximately 3 days, Anya replied. After that, the graft begins to degrade. The changes revert and you'll need another application, which means another procedure. We're on a tight schedule. Anya gestured towards a figure standing quietly in the corner of the room. He was tall and thin, with cybernetic enhancements glinting beneath the sleeves of his jumpsuit. This is Kai. He's our tech specialist. He'll be responsible for applying and maintaining the graft. Kai stepped forward, his expression serious. The procedure itself takes about 6 hours. It involves a series of micro-injections and sonic resonators to restructure your cellular matrix. It's not pleasant. Expect intense pain, fever, and a significant recovery period, at least 12 hours of enforced stasis. He held up a device resembling a neural interface. This will help regulate your brain activity during the transformation, minimizing the risk of personality bleed. Michael rubbed his temples. So, to recap, I get tortured for 6 hours, risk turning into a green-skinned berserker, and only have 3 days to complete the mission. Essentially, Anya said, her lips twitching slightly. And you're sure this is the only way? Michael asked, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his team. He saw grit, but also a flicker of concern. He was responsible for these people, for Lita. We've explored every other option, Michael, Anya said softly. This is the only way to get inside the facility undetected. We've taken every precaution we can, but the Vorkarians are not. Accommodating, speed and stealth are our only advantages. She turned to a nearby table, revealing a neatly folded pile of dark green uniforms and a stack of identification cards. These are Vorkarian standard issue. Rank, enlisted technician. The IDs are biometric. Kai has already calibrated the graft to mimic the necessary genetic markers, but you'll need to act the part. For the next several hours, the briefing room transformed into a crash course in Vorkarian culture. Rex, surprisingly adept at mimicry, barked out guttural phrases, correcting Michael's pronunciation with a snarl. Anya played recordings of Vorkarian military protocols, drilling them on rank structure and chain of command. Holographic simulations flickered, depicting Vorkarian social customs, posture, and even preferred fighting styles. Remember, Anya said, pausing a simulation of a Vorkarian greeting ritual, direct eye contact is a sign of aggression. Keep your gaze averted unless you want to challenge someone to a duel. As the others practiced their Vorkarian, Anya pulled Michael aside, unrolling a schematic of the research facility. This is what we're up against. The diagram revealed a sprawling complex built into the side of a jagged asteroid. Multiple checkpoints guarded the entrance, each equipped with laser grids and automated turrets. Patrol routes crisscrossed the interior, monitored by hundreds of surveillance cameras. Biometric scanners controlled access to every section. The facility is powered by a geothermal tap deep within the asteroid, Anya explained, pointing to a pulsing red core on the diagram. That's our primary vulnerability. If we can disrupt the power supply, we can disable the security systems long enough to reach the research labs. What about blind spots? Michael asked, his eyes scanning the schematic. Anya smiled grimly. There are a few maintenance tunnels, ventilation shafts, but they're heavily patrolled during shift changes. She highlighted a series of narrow corridors. These are your best bet. They're used for transporting equipment. Less traffic, fewer cameras, but they're also incredibly cramped. They spent the next hour meticulously refining the mission plan, assigning roles and contingencies. Rex would act as a diversion, drawing security forces away from the main objective. Anya would provide technical support, hacking into the security network and disabling the alarms. Michael, disguised as a Vorkarian technician, would infiltrate the research labs and locate the evidence of the experiments. "This is insane," Michael muttered, running a hand through his hair. "We're walking into a hornet's nest." Anya placed a hand on his arm, her gaze intense. "We have to do this, Michael, for Lita, for all the others who can't protect themselves." Michael met her gaze, his own hardening with grit. "I know, I won't let them down." He thought of Lita, her bright eyes and trusting smile. He would face any risk, endure any pain to ensure her safety. Anya squeezed his arm. "I know you won't. I believe in you, Michael." Later, in the sterile confines of the med bay, Kai prepped Michael for the transformation. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Instruments gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. "This is going to hurt," Kai said, his voice devoid of emotion as he adjusted the settings on a complex-looking device. "A lot. I'm injecting a localized paralytic, but it won't completely eliminate the pain, just dull it." Michael swallowed hard, his throat dry. He lay on the medical table, his heart pounding in his chest. Anya stood beside him, her expression a mixture of concern and willpower. "There's one more thing you should know," she said quietly. "About the graft, we've observed a correlation between the procedure and a temporary loss of self." Michael frowned. "Loss of self, what does that mean?" "It's rare," Anya clarified, "but some recipients have reported a period of disorientation, a blurring of memories. They sometimes have trouble distinguishing between their own identity and the persona of the Vorkarian they're emulating. It fades after the graft degrades, but—" Michael closed his eyes, picturing Lita's face. He thought of her laughter, the way she snuggled against him when she was scared, the trust in her alien eyes. He had to do this. He had to protect her. He opened his eyes, his gaze meeting Anya's. "Do it," he said, his voice firm. "Let's get this over with." The bio-engineered skin seared into his flesh, each microscopic tendril latching onto his own cells like a hungry parasite. It felt like being burned alive, 1,000 needles simultaneously piercing every inch of his exposed skin. Agony, pure and unrelenting, threatened to consume him. Michael's vision blurred, his breath hitched in ragged gasps. He squeezed his eyes shut, the lab around him dissolving into a swirling vortex of pain. He needed something, anything, to anchor him. Lita. He forced his eyes open, focusing on the small Vorkarian girl standing beside Anya. Her large, violet eyes were wide with concern, her brow furrowed with worry. Seeing her innocent face, her unwavering trust was like a splash of cold water on his burning skin. It wasn't enough to extinguish the pain, but it gave him something to hold onto, a reason to endure. Kai, his voice calm and professional, broke through the haze. "Vitals are elevated but within acceptable parameters. Anya, administer another dose of analgesic." Michael gritted his teeth, the metallic tang of blood filling his mouth. He watched as tendrils of iridescent blue spread across his skin, the familiar human pink being replaced by a mottled pattern of greens and browns, a roadmap of alien biology being etched onto his very being. The texture shifted too, becoming rougher, almost scaled in places. Then came the emotions, not his own but something else. A primal surge of aggression, a predatory instinct he'd never felt before. It was a cold, ruthless hunger, a desire to dominate and control. The lab seemed to shrink, the soft lighting feeling oppressive. His muscles tensed, coiling like a viper ready to strike. Anya, her voice filled with concern, said, "Michael, are you all right? You seem different." He didn't register her words fully, the alien instincts clouding his mind. His gaze drifted to the energy pistol lying on a nearby workbench. An urge, powerful and overwhelming, compelled him to reach for it, to feel its weight in his hand, to unleash its power. His hand moved, almost of its own volition, reaching for the weapon. A soft sound stopped him. A small body moved in front of Anya, blocking his path. Lita. She stood between him and Anya, her small frame radiating an unwavering trust. Her violet eyes, usually so full of playful curiosity, were now filled with a profound faith in him. The sight of her, so small and vulnerable, yet so brave, shattered the alien influence. The predatory instincts receded, replaced by a wave of guilt and self-loathing. What was he doing? He was supposed to protect her, not threaten those she cared about. He clenched his fist, forcing his hand to drop back to his side. The urge to reach for the weapon remained, a phantom itch beneath his skin, but he fought it down, burying it deep within his consciousness. Lita. He managed to rasp, his voice strained. Kai, sensing the shift, quickly adjusted the controls on a nearby console, increasing the counter-suppressant dosage. This should help stabilize his mental state. Anya stepped forward, her face etched with worry. "Michael, maybe we should stop. This is too much. I don't like what this is doing to you." He shook his head, his eyes no, "Arp. No. We have to finish this, I promised Lita." He met Anya's gaze, his own eyes filled with a fierce dedication. "I can handle it, just give me a minute." The team exchanged uneasy glances, but they knew there was no arguing with Michael when he was this determined. Kai nodded, and the procedure continued. The remaining stages were even more jarring. A series of injections, each one sending a jolt of foreign chemicals through his veins, altering his bone structure, reshaping his muscles. Sonic treatments followed, vibrating his vocal cords, twisting them into a configuration capable of producing the guttural clicks and growls of the Vorkarian language. He gasped, clutching at the edge of the operating table as his bones seemed to shift and grind within his body. Speaking became an agonizing effort, his tongue feeling thick and unfamiliar. Lita stepped closer, her small hand reaching out to grasp his. She looked up at him, her violet eyes shining with encouragement. She spoke, her voice soft but clear, "Garak Halmek, Michael. Garak Halmek. You are strong, Michael, you are strong." The words, though alien, resonated within him with surprising clarity. He understood them not just intellectually but viscerally. He felt the weight of their meaning, the depth of Lita's belief in him. He blinked, surprised. I understood that," he managed to croak, his voice raspy and distorted. Kai nodded, his expression a mixture of concern and scientific curiosity. "That's part of the skin graft process. The bioengineered skin is integrating Vorkarian language directly into your brain. It's remarkable." Anya, despite her earlier reservations, was already preparing a set of Vorkarian clothing. She held up a dark gray tunic, its fabric woven with intricate patterns of metallic thread. "Almost there, Michael. Just a few more adjustments, and the transformation will be complete." The world exploded with sensation. Every light in the med bay burned like a miniature sun, etching afterimages on his retinas. The hum of the station's life support system roared in his ears, each vibration amplified 100-fold. Michael gasped, clutching his head as a wave of nausea washed over him. He stumbled, his legs suddenly foreign, his center of gravity shifted. He fought to stay upright, his muscles straining against the unfamiliar pull. Lita approached cautiously, her multifaceted eyes wide with concern. She reached out a small, three-fingered hand, offering it in a gesture of support. Michael recoiled, a guttural sound escaping his throat. He hadn't meant to, but the instinctive aggression, the primal urge to protect himself, surged to the forefront. Anya took a barely perceptible step back, her hand instinctively moving towards the sidearm she no longer carried. A flash, a memory. A little girl giggling as he lifted her high in the air, her small hands gripping his face. His daughter, the warmth of her touch, the pure, unadulterated love in her eyes. Gone. He blinked, the image fading, replaced by Lita's concerned gaze. "Lita, I am so sorry," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out, his hand trembling, and gently cupped her face. "I would never. I promise you I will protect you, no matter what." He fought the alien instincts clawing at the edges of his mind, clinging to the love that anchored him. Anya studied the reading scrolling across her datapad. Fascinating. Vorkarian language centers. Significantly increased activity. A burst of static crackled from the comm system, followed by a rapid-fire exchange of alien syllables. It was gibberish to Anya, but to Michael it was clear as day. "Vorkarian patrol inbound, bearing 0902, weapons hot." "Anya," Michael said, his voice strained, "Vorkarian patrol heading our way. They're armed." Anya's eyes widened. "How did you?" "I'm not picking up any coherent signals." Excitement flickered in her gaze, quickly followed by a shadow of unease. "Just heard it," Michael mumbled, fighting to understand what was happening. Anya cleared her throat, forcing a professional tone. "Let's test your enhanced capabilities. How about a little arm wrestling?" She gestured to a nearby table, a forced smile on her face. Michael hesitated but complied. He placed his elbow on the table, his hand gripping Anya's. She braced herself, a playful glint in her eyes. He applied a small amount of pressure, testing his strength. The table groaned. He increased the pressure slightly. A sharp crack echoed through the lab. The table splintered, collapsing under the force, sending Anya stumbling backward. Michael stared at his hand, his face a mask of shock and horror. He backed away, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I need to get out of here." He turned and fled, retreating to the cramped confines of his quarters. Lita watched him go, her brow furrowed with concern. Without hesitation, she followed. Michael slammed the door shut, leaning against it, his heart pounding in his chest. The room felt too small, the air too thick. He was losing control, becoming something else. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Lita stood in the doorway, her gaze unwavering. She stepped inside and approached him slowly, her movements deliberate and calming. She reached out, placing her hand on his arm, and began to hum a low, resonant tone. It was a Vorkarian calming technique, a series of carefully modulated vibrations designed to soothe frayed nerves. Michael flinched at first, then slowly relaxed. The humming resonated through his body, a soothing balm against the chaotic storm raging within him. His breathing slowed, his muscles loosened, and the burning intensity in his eyes began to fade. Anya watched the scene unfold on a small monitor, her face etched with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. The hidden camera in Michael's quarters provided a clear view of the interspecies interaction. She couldn't deny the genuine affection between them, but the implications. Suddenly, a blood-curdling Vorkarian battle cry ripped through the comm system, shattering the fragile peace. Michael's body convulsed. His eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural crimson light. A guttural roar erupted from his throat, shaking the very foundations of the room. He lashed out, his fist connecting with the metal wall, leaving a gaping dent. He spun around, tearing apart furniture, his movements fueled by a terrifying primal rage. Anya stared at the monitor, her blood running cold. This wasn't just a transformation, it was a possession. "Michael!" She shouted into the comm, her voice imbued with panic. Michael staggered back, his eyes widening with horror as he surveyed the destruction. He looked at Lita, his face contorted with anguish. "Anya, please. You have to stop this. I can't control it. The world snapped back into focus, a jagged, throbbing pain behind Michael's eyes. His quarters were a disaster. A metal bunk was twisted at an unnatural angle, sparking faintly. Scraps of torn fabric and shattered equipment littered the floor. He tasted blood, a metallic tang coating his tongue. Panic flared. Lita. He scrambled to his feet, his muscles screaming in protest, and frantically searched the room. Lita, where are you? The door hissed open, and Anya stood silhouetted in the frame, her face etched with concern. Lita peeked out from behind her leg, her large Vorkarian eyes wide with a mixture of fear and... Was that understanding? Michael, Anya said, her voice tight. What happened here? Are you all right? He ran a hand through his matted hair, the guilt crashing down on him. I don't know, I lost control, I could have hurt her. He gestured weakly at the wreckage. I could have killed her. Anya stepped into the room, her gaze sweeping over the destruction. This transformation. It's more unstable than we thought. You're a danger to yourself, Michael, but more importantly, you're a danger to Lita. Michael's heart clenched, he couldn't argue. I need to be isolated, put me somewhere I can't hurt anyone. Lita stepped forward, her small hand reaching for his. No, Michael, I stay with you. Her voice was small but firm, resonating with a strength beyond her years. Lita, no, Michael pleaded, his voice cracking. I don't want to hurt you. You won't, she insisted, her grip tightening on his hand. I help you. Anya hesitated, her eyes flicking between Michael's pleading face and Lita's unwavering purpose. I can't condone this, Michael, it's too risky. But the look in Lita's eyes seemed to sway her. All right, she relented, but I'm monitoring you both every second, through the security cameras. One wrong move and I'm locking you down. Michael nodded, grateful for Anya's reluctant trust but terrified of what might happen. Days blurred into a torturous cycle of suppression. Michael retreated inward, battling the rising tide of Vorkarian instincts. He meditated, focusing on the image of his daughter, Emily, her bright smile a beacon in the darkness. Her face, her laughter not the guttural urges that clawed at his mind. He saw her in his memories, playing with toys, laughing with him on the beach, her bright smile a constant reminder of what he was fighting for. But the Vorkarian instincts were relentless, urging him towards aggression, towards dominance. He saw himself towering over others, felt the phantom sensation of powerful muscles straining against his skin, heard the echo of a predatory roar in his ears. Lita stayed by his side, a constant, reassuring presence. Sensing his inner turmoil, she began to hum soft Vorkarian lullabies filling the small room. Her small hand would reach out and touch his arm, a gentle, soothing weight. The lullabies. They were doing something, more than just calming him. As Lita sang, fragmented images flickered in his mind, swirling nebulae, constellations he didn't recognize, geometric patterns that seemed to vibrate with energy. He focused, pushing aside the fear and the pain, and tried to make sense of the chaos. The geometric patterns sharpened, resolving into lines, symbols, a map of something. He saw clusters of stars, connected by faint lines, and the map seemed to pulse with a faint energy. Lita, he said, his voice hoarse, sing that again. She tilted her head, her brow furrowed in concern, but she obeyed, her voice weaving the intricate melody of the lullaby. The map in his mind solidified, revealing a series of coordinates, leading towards a remote sector of space. He spent hours deciphering the symbols, cross-referencing them with star charts, his hope growing with each decoded fragment. It was a map to a remote Vorkarian research facility, a place rumored to be experimenting with genetic manipulation, a place that might hold the key to reversing the transformation. Unbeknownst to Michael, Anya was watching, her brow furrowed in suspicion. She had intercepted his transmissions, noting his rapid understanding of the Vorkarian language, his sudden interest in obscure star charts. "What are you hiding, Michael?" She muttered to herself, her fingers flying across the console. Michael knew he couldn't tell Anya. Not yet. She would try to stop him, convinced it was too dangerous. But he had to try, not just for himself, but for Lita. He couldn't risk another outburst, another loss of control. "We need to leave," he told Lita, his voice low. Tonight. Lita nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They worked in secret, gathering supplies, modifying a small transport ship docked in a forgotten corner of the station. Michael rerouted power conduits, bypassed security protocols, his movements precise and efficient. Lita, using her small size, squeezed into tight spaces, retrieving tools and components. As they were finishing, Anya appeared in the doorway, her face grim. I know about the map, Michael. I know about the research facility. You can't go. I have to, Anya, Michael said, his voice firm. I need to fix this, not just for me but for Lita. It's too dangerous, that facility. It's been abandoned for years. There's no telling what you'll find there. I have to try, Michael repeated, his eyes pleading. Anya searched his face, her expression softening. She saw the desperation, the fear, but also the unwavering persistence. Damn you, Michael, she muttered, shaking her head. All right, I can't let you go without giving you a chance. She turned and walked away, returning moments later with a small, metallic device. A cloaking device, experimental, but it should get you past the station's sensors. Michael took the device, his fingers brushing against Anya's. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Just come back, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Please. They boarded the transport ship, Lita strapping herself into the co-pilot's seat. Michael activated the cloaking device, the ship shimmering and disappearing from view. He fired the engines, the transport ship silently slipping away from the station. Anya watched them disappear into the void, her heart heavy with worry and a strange, unfamiliar sense of hope. She didn't see the small, almost invisible camera hidden in the corner of the docking bay, recording her every move, transmitting her betrayal to unseen forces. The transport ship decloaked near a derelict space station, its hull scarred and pitted by years of neglect. The station drifted silently in a region of space marked as uncharted on most navigational charts, a graveyard of forgotten dreams and broken promises. This is it, Michael said, his voice grim. Let's see what we can find. He and Lita donned their environmental suits and depressurized the transport ship. They stepped out onto the derelict station's docking arm, the silence broken only by the hiss of their respirators. The airlock groaned open, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. The walls were covered in a layer of frost, and the air hung heavy with the scent of decay. As they ventured deeper into the station, they found evidence of Vorkarian experimentation. Rows of empty stasis pods, discarded surgical instruments, and flickering holographic displays showing distorted images of genetic sequences. Then, etched into a bulkhead near the central research lab, they found a message, scrawled in Vorkarian, "Turn back. There is nothing here but death and madness." The central control hub of the derelict station swallowed them whole. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through cracks in the corroded viewport, each a tiny, silent testament to decades of abandonment. A low, persistent hum vibrated through the deck plates, the death rattle of failing systems struggling to maintain a semblance of order. The air tasted stale, metallic, and faintly acrid. Michael moved with practiced efficiency, his gloved hands tracing the spaghetti of damaged circuits behind a control panel. Gotta get life support back online, at least enough to filter this air, he muttered, his breath misting in the chill. Sparks flew as he bypassed a fried regulator, rerouting power with a focused intensity that belied the weariness etched on his face. Lita, her multifaceted eyes glowing softly, rotated slowly, taking in the expanse of the control hub. Not seeing but sensing. She tilted her head, a slight frown creasing her brow ridges. A low, guttural warble escaped her throat, a sound of unease. "What is it, Lita?" Michael asked, pausing his work. "Presence," she rasped, her voice still rough from disuse. "Hidden, deep, not Vorkarian." A tremor ran through her small frame. "Distress." They moved deeper into the hub, past rows of inactive consoles and flickering holographic displays. They found a series of encrypted data logs, their surfaces cold and smooth to the touch. Vorkarian script, intricate and angular, covered the panels. Encrypted, Michael said, running a diagnostic scan with his wrist-mounted computer. Need a Vorkarian access code. Lita stared at the symbols, her eyes unfocused. A faint hum resonated from her, a resonance of memory struggling to surface. She touched a panel tentatively, her claws clicking softly against the cold metal. A jolt like static electricity coursed through her. Images flashed behind her eyes. Sterile white rooms, cold metal tables, the looming figures of Vorkarian scientists. Flashback. A younger Lita, barely able to stand, is strapped to a table. A scientist, his face obscured by a sterile mask, runs a scanner over her small body. Other runts, their eyes wide with fear, huddle in the corners of the room. A needle glints in the harsh light. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Lita gasping, disoriented. "Lita, you okay?" Michael asked, his voice imbued with concern. She shook her head, trying to clear the fragments of memory. Code, remembering, snippets. She focused on the panel again, her claws tracing the Vorkarian symbols. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to enter a sequence. The panel flickered, then sprung to life. A small portion of the data log decrypted, revealing a single line of text. Hidden Experimental Lab Sector 7, Sublevel Gamma. Michael swore softly. A hidden lab? What were they experimenting on here? They followed the directions, descending into the depths of the station. Sector 7 was a maze of narrow corridors and decaying machinery. The air grew colder, the hum of failing systems louder, more insistent. Finally, they reached a sealed door, its surface scarred and pitted. Michael bypassed the security lock with ease, his fingers dancing across the control panel. The door hissed open, revealing a long, narrow chamber. Cryogenic chambers lined the walls, their glass surfaces frosted with ice. Most were empty, their life support systems long dead. But one chamber at the far end of the room glowed with a faint, eerie light. Within, a figure floated in suspended animation. Suddenly, the station groaned. A jolt ran through the deck plates, throwing Michael off balance. The lights flickered violently, then died, plunging the chamber into near darkness, save for the eerie glow of the active cryogenic chamber. A cascade of debris rained down from the ceiling, rusted pipes, broken conduits, chunks of concrete. "Lita, down!" Michael yelled, shoving her behind a fallen console. The surge had overloaded the failing gravity systems. A klaxon blared, a deafening shriek that echoed through the derelict station. And within the active cryogenic chamber, the figure began to stir. The ice on the glass shattered, spraying shards across the chamber. The figure inside, no longer dormant, began to convulse. The chamber hissed, releasing a plume of supercooled gas. And then, with a final, shuddering groan, the door swung open. Standing before them was a Vorkarian, but twisted, mutated. His body was grotesquely elongated, his limbs unnaturally thin and wiry. His head was oversized, his skull bulging with pulsing veins. His eyes, burning with an unnatural intensity, locked onto Lita. He was a telekinetic. Debris swirled around him, forming a vortex of deadly projectiles. With a flick of his wrist, he launched a chunk of metal at Michael, who barely managed to deflect it with his enhanced strength. "You, abomination!" The mutated scientist snarled, his voice a guttural rasp. "You are an insult to the Vorkarian race." Lita stepped forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and empathy. "Why?" "Hurt," she whispered, reaching out with her senses. She felt his pain, his isolation, his burning hatred. The scientist recoiled as if struck. "Do not touch me with your filth," he roared, unleashing a telekinetic blast that sent Lita flying backwards. Michael roared in fury, his enhanced strength surging through him. He threw himself in front of Lita, shielding her from the debris swirling around them, but his control was weakening. The metallic tang of blood filled his mouth. "This facility," the scientist hissed, his eyes fixed on Lita. "It was meant to create super soldiers. Vorkarian runts genetically enhanced, their minds weaponized. He laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. But the experiments, they failed until you. Michael's vision blurred. He saw Lita, but superimposed on her face was the image of his daughter lost so long ago. The protective rage that had been simmering within him boiled over. He lunged at the scientist, his fists clenched. "You monster!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with grief and fury. Lita cried out, reaching out with her powers, not in attack, but in an attempt to connect. She flooded the scientist's mind with visions, images of love, compassion, acceptance. She showed him Michael, her human adoptive father, caring for her, protecting her, loving her unconditionally. The scientist paused, his attack faltering. His eyes widened, his face contorted in a mask of confusion and pain. He staggered backwards, clutching his head. The debris swirling around him slowed, then stopped. He was at war with his own mind. "Now, Michael, now!" Lita screamed. Michael, seizing the opportunity, grabbed Lita's hand and dragged her towards the exit. He slammed the control panel, triggering the lab's self-destruct sequence. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and the floor began to shake. They raced through the corridors, the station groaning and buckling around them. Explosions rocked the structure, sending debris tumbling down. They reached their transport ship just as the station began to break apart. They blasted away from the derelict station as it disintegrated into a cloud of debris. As they jumped to hyperspace, Michael slumped back in his pilot's chair, exhausted but alive. Lita, her eyes fixed on the holographic display, began to analyze the unlocked data logs. Vorkarian text scrolled across the screen, revealing a complex web of information. Main research facility. Lita murmured, her voice barely audible above the hum of the engines. Location: Sector Prime. Ongoing experiments. She paused, her brow furrowing. Not just Vorkarians, other species involved. She looked at Michael, her eyes filled with a chilling realization. Anya's sister may have been here. The data log swam on the cracked screen, lines of Vorkarian script resolving into horrifying clarity. Michael traced a finger across a schematic of the research facility. High security sector, genetic experiments. He muttered, the words catching in his throat. Lita, perched on a stack of repurposed power cells, tilted her head, her multifaceted eyes wide with concern. A faint tremor ran through her chitinous fingers. What they do, Michael? He hesitated, then pointed to a specific cell block marked in crimson. Anya's sister. They're holding her there, using her, genetic modification, experimentation. The weight of the words settled heavily in the cockpit. Number, Lita whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the ship's engines. We must help. Michael nodded, his heart made. We will, but this place is locked down tighter than a neutron star. We need an edge. He glanced towards the salvaged cloaking device, a tangle of wires and repurposed Vorkarian tech. Time to get creative. Hours blurred into a frenzy of activity. Michael, fueled by caffeine paste and unwavering grit, coaxed the derelict cloaking device back to life. Sparks flew as he rerouted power conduits, his brow furrowed in concentration. Lita, meanwhile, practiced manipulating the ship's sensor array, her unique empathic abilities allowing her to perceive the subtle fluctuations in energy fields. "Ready," she announced, her voice stronger now, permeated with a newfound confidence. "I can. Feel them, the sensors. I can guide us." The transport ship, now shimmering with a faint, almost imperceptible distortion field, slipped into the inky blackness beyond the derelict station. Asteroid fields loomed, jagged and unforgiving. Vorkarian patrol ships pulsed with menacing energy signatures. But Lita, her eyes closed, guided Michael through the treacherous maze, weaving between the asteroids and slipping past the sensor arrays like a phantom. Left, now right, steady, almost there. Her voice was a soft, constant presence, a lifeline in the void. As they cleared the blockade, Michael activated a comm channel. "Anya, this is Michael. Do you read?" He repeated the coded message, his fingers drumming nervously on the console. A tense silence stretched, punctuated only by the hiss of static. Then a response, faint but clear. "Michael, is that really you? The Vorkarians, they're watching everything. Meet me at Kepler 186F, the old trading post, but be careful, they know you're out there." Kepler 186F was a desolate rock orbiting a dying star, a forgotten waypoint on the galactic trade routes. The trading post was a crumbling ruin, a monument to a bygone era. Anya waited in the shadows, her Vorkarian armor gleaming dully in the dim light. "Michael," she breathed, relief flooding her features. "You came." "We promised," Michael replied, his hand resting on Lita's shoulder. Anya's gaze fell on Lita, her expression softening. You saved her, thank you." She pulled up a holographic display revealing the layout of the research facility. "This is it. Sector 7 is where they're holding my sister, Alara, high security, heavily guarded. They're working on weaponizing her genetic code." "Weaponizing?" Michael echoed, his voice grim. "She's resilient like Lita, but the experiments, they're not kind, and there are others, Vorkarians who don't fit their perfect mold. They're all suffering." Anya's voice cracked with emotion. "I don't know if we can save them all." Michael placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "We'll do everything we can, Anya, I promise. We'll expose what they're doing." Lita stepped forward, her small hand reaching out to Anya. She closed her eyes, and a wave of warmth washed over Anya, a vision of a future where Vorkarians and humans lived together in peace, where differences were celebrated, not condemned. Anya gasped, her eyes widening. "Hope. I see hope. Thank you, Lita." Michael turned back to the task at hand. "We need disguises. Something to get us past the security checkpoints." He rummaged through a crate of salvaged materials. "I think I can fabricate something convincing enough." Hours later, under the flickering light of the trading post's emergency generator, Michael surveyed his handiwork. 2 sets of Vorkarian technician uniforms, cobbled together from scavenged materials and painted with meticulous detail. They weren't perfect, but they were good enough to fool a casual observer. He also tinkered with the transport ship, adding a jury-rigged energy cannon and a concealed escape pod. "Just in case things get complicated," he explained. Lita, meanwhile, practiced masking her presence, focusing her empathic abilities to blend in with the Vorkarian energy signatures. She could feel the subtle nuances of their thought patterns, their anxieties, their fears. "I can do it," she declared, her voice confident. "I can make them not see us." Under the cover of darkness, the transport ship, now bearing the markings of a Vorkarian maintenance vessel, approached the research facility. The monolithic structure loomed in the distance, a stark reminder of the power and ruthlessness of the Vorkarian regime. They slipped past the outer perimeter, Lita masking their presence, Michael expertly navigating the ship through the sensor grid. Everything was going according to plan, almost too smoothly. As they entered the facility's docking bay, a gruff voice crackled over the comm system. "Vessel designation TX-492, please identify yourselves and state your purpose." Michael swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. "This is Technician Crew 7, reporting for scheduled maintenance on Subsector Gamma. We have a work order for power conduit repairs." A moment of tense silence. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, a hulking Vorkarian security officer, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Stand down, technicians. Routine inspection. Let's see your credentials. And your cargo." The officer's gaze lingered a moment too long, his multifaceted eyes glinting in the sterile light of the corridor. Michael swallowed, the fabricated Vorkarian access code burning in his memory. He recited the authorization phrase, the guttural sounds feeling alien and clumsy on his tongue. Lita, perched on his shoulder beneath the folds of the stolen Vorkarian uniform, subtly amplified the officer's innate boredom, a gentle telepathic nudge towards the mundane paperwork piling up on his datapad. The officer blinked, a flicker of something crossing his face. He stamped the datapad, the sound echoing in the narrow corridor. "Authorization confirmed. Proceed with necessary repairs," he grunted, but his gaze remained fixed on Michael. "Report back upon completion." He keyed his comm. "Officer Glar to command. Engineering team en route to Sector 7. Minor. Routing discrepancy." Michael nodded curtly, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Understood, officer." He steered the maintenance cart forward, Lita's small hand gripping his tightly under the fabric. The airlock hissed open and they stepped inside, the door sealing shut behind them. "He's suspicious," Michael muttered, his voice tight. "He's definitely suspicious." Lita chirped softly, a reassuring sound. "He will not stop us, Michael." They consulted the schematics Anya had provided, the labyrinthine corridors of the Vorkarian facility stretching before them. According to the map, they needed to reach Sub-Level 4, Sector Gamma. But as they rounded the first corner, they encountered a patrol of 3 heavily armed Vorkarian soldiers, their weapons glinting menacingly. "Damn it," Michael cursed under his breath. Anya said nothing about this. They ducked into a side passage, a narrow service corridor marked restricted access, maintenance personnel only. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and decay. As they moved deeper, the sounds of the facility faded, replaced by a low, rhythmic hum. The hum grew louder, resonating in Michael's chest. They rounded a corner and stopped dead. The corridor opened into a large chamber, filled with strange, pulsating machines connected to a series of glass cylinders. Inside the cylinders floated grotesque creatures, a horrifying menagerie of altered and twisted species. Their bodies were contorted, their eyes wide with silent terror. Wires and tubes snaked into their flesh, feeding them fluids and extracting. Something. Michael recoiled, his stomach churning. What in God's name? He saw a small, furry creature, vaguely resembling a Terran squirrel, its body stretched and distorted, its eyes repermeated with complex optical sensors. Another cylinder contained a reptilian being, its scales shimmering with an unnatural luminescence, its limbs fused together into a single, pulsating mass. "Experiments," Lita whispered, her voice filled with horror. "They are hurting them." Michael clenched his fists, his face flushed with anger. This is monstrous. We have to do something." "Anya," Lita reminded him softly, her sister. Michael hesitated, torn. "I know, but can we just leave them like this, knowing what's happening here?" Lita reached out, her small hand touching the cold glass of a cylinder containing a bird-like alien, its wings clipped, its eyes filled with despair. She closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I feel their pain, Michael," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We must help them, please." He sighed, his decision made. He activated his wrist-mounted scanner, searching for a way to override the containment fields. He found a junction box hidden behind a tangle of wires. He opened it, revealing a complex array of circuits. "This could take a while," he muttered. As he worked, Lita wandered deeper into the chamber, her eyes scanning the machinery. She stopped before a large metal container, its surface covered in intricate symbols. She reached out, her fingers tracing the strange glyphs. "Michael," she called softly, "there is something here." He joined her, his brow furrowed. The container was locked, but he quickly bypassed the security system, the lock clicking open with a soft hiss. Inside, he found a series of data logs, encrypted with a complex Vorkarian code. "Jackpot," he murmured. He connected his datapad to the container, initiating the decryption sequence. The process took several minutes, the datapad humming as it cracked the Vorkarian encryption. Finally, the logs opened, revealing a chilling truth. The Vorkarians were not simply experimenting on these creatures. They were attempting to weaponize their unique abilities, splicing their genes and enhancing their natural powers for military applications. A new section of the chamber shimmered into view and Michael's blood ran cold. The new section was filled with stasis pods. With I know, him were human beings. Number. Michael breathed, his voice thick with disbelief. He recognized the telltale signs of genetic modification, subtle alterations to their bone structure, neural implants embedded in their skulls. He felt a surge of rage, a burning desire for vengeance. One of the humans, a woman with close cropped hair and haunted eyes, flickered back to consciousness within her stasis pod. She stared at Michael, her lips moving silently. Anya's sister, Michael read her lips. They took her. Deeper inside, extreme experimentation. Michael's tenacity hardened. Lita, we need to split up. You need to scout ahead, find Anya's sister. I'll disable these stasis fields and get these people out of here. Lita looked at him, her eyes filled with concern. It is too dangerous, Michael. I know, but we don't have a choice. We can't leave them here. He paused. You can do this, Lita. I believe in you. Use your abilities, mask your presence, navigate the security systems. You're the only one who can reach her in time. Lita hesitated, then nodded resolutely. I will find her, Michael. Be careful. She closed her eyes, focusing her mind. A faint shimmer enveloped her body, rendering her almost invisible. She slipped silently into the corridor, her small form disappearing into the shadows. Michael turned back to the stasis pods, his hands trembling. He located the control panel and began to work, his fingers flying across the keys. He bypassed the security protocols, disabling the stasis fields one by one. The pods hissed open, releasing the human prisoners. They stumbled out, disoriented and weak, blinking in the harsh light. What's happening? One of them stammered, his voice hoarse. We're getting you out of here, Michael said grimly. But we need to move now. As he released the last prisoner, a klaxon blared through the facility, its deafening wail echoing through the corridors. Red lights flashed, bathing the chamber in an ominous glow. Damn it, Michael cursed. They know we're here. Meanwhile, deep within the facility, Lita crept through the ventilation shafts, her small body navigating the narrow passages with ease. She could feel Anya's sister, a warm, flickering presence in the distance. She reached a junction point, peering through a grate into a hidden laboratory. Inside, strapped to a metal table, was a young woman with fiery red hair, Anya's sister. Vorkarian scientists in sterile white suits surrounded her, their faces obscured by masks. They were attaching electrodes to her head, injecting her with glowing fluids. The woman screamed, her voice raw with pain. A tall, gaunt Vorkarian scientist, his eyes burning with fanaticism, oversaw the procedure. He turned, his gaze falling directly on Lita. He gasped, his multifaceted eyes widening in disbelief. The Runt, he hissed. It cannot be. He lunged towards her, his hand outstretched. Seize it, it's genetics. They are the key. Lita recoiled, narrowly avoiding his grasp. She scrambled back through the ventilation shaft, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out with her mind, sending a desperate telepathic warning to Michael. Michael, danger, Anya's sister. Laboratory, hurry. Michael heard her cry in his mind, a jolt of pure terror. He grabbed his weapon, a pulse rifle he'd salvaged from a downed Vorkarian fighter. Move, move, move. He yelled to the freed prisoners, leading them out of the stasis chamber and towards the laboratory, the klaxon screaming in their ears. They burst through the door, weapons blazing, into a chaotic firefight with the Vorkarian security forces. Blaster fire ripped through the air, carving chunks out of the lab's sterile walls. Michael roared, shoving a disoriented prisoner behind an overturned table. Use anything you can find. We need cover. He snapped off a quick burst with his scavenged rifle, dropping a Vorkarian guard who'd gotten too close. The freed prisoners, a motley collection of humans and a few other alien species, were surprisingly quick to adapt, grabbing discarded tools and using them as makeshift weapons. One woman wielded a broken data pad like a shield. Another swung a heavy wrench with surprising force. Lita, a whirlwind of focused fury, was locked in combat with the scientist. He was a grotesque parody of life, his limbs reprimated with gleaming cybernetics that pulsed with Vorkarian energy. One arm ended in a wicked blade, the other in a cannon that spat bolts of searing plasma. She dodged a swipe of the blade, the air crackling where it passed, and slammed her fist into his augmented chest. The scientist barely flinched. "Foolish runt," he snarled, his voice a distorted growl. "You possess a unique genetic structure, one that could revolutionize Vorkarian biology, but your sister, Anya's sister, she holds the key to stabilizing the modifications. She's far more valuable than you'll ever be." Michael heard the scientist's words and felt a surge of protective anger. Anya, fighting beside him, went rigid. The scientist lunged again, forcing Lita to backpedal. Together, Michael and Lita unleashed a coordinated attack. Michael fired a concentrated burst at the scientist's legs, forcing him to stumble, while Lita used the opening to unleash a blast of concussive energy, sending him crashing into a bank of equipment. He was down, but not out. With a final, desperate act, he smacked his head onto a control panel, triggering a klaxon that blared through the facility. Red lights flashed, and heavy blast doors slammed shut, sealing off the lab. Anya rushed to her sister's side. The woman was a pale, skeletal figure, barely visible beneath a tangle of wires and tubes. Her breathing was shallow and ragged, her eyes fluttering weakly. She was kept alive only by the complex machinery that snaked around her body, feeding her nutrients and regulating her vital signs. "We need to move her," Michael said grimly, surveying the lab. "Now." He began stripping components from a nearby medical station, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He rerouted power cables, bypassed safety protocols, and cobbled together a makeshift life support system. It was crude, but it would buy them time. The freed prisoners, initially dazed and weakened by their captivity, were starting to show signs of resilience. They moved with a newfound purpose, their eyes burning with a mixture of fear and grit. These were not soldiers, but they were survivors. "I know this system," a voice called out. A man, gaunt but with a spark of intelligence in his eyes, approached Michael. "I was an engineer on a Vorkarian mining station. Their lockdown systems are all the same. I might be able to bypass it." "Do it," Michael said, his voice tight. "Now." While the engineer worked feverishly at a control panel, Michael and Lita led the remaining prisoners towards the designated extraction point, following the schematics displayed on a salvaged data pad. The corridors were eerily silent, the only sound the rhythmic thud of their boots and the hiss of escaping gases. They rounded a corner and were met with a hail of blaster fire. Vorkarian security forces, clad in black armor, stood blocking their path. "Lita, diversion!" Michael yelled, shoving the prisoners back. Lita nodded, her eyes glowing with power. She unleashed a wave of energy, creating shimmering illusions that danced in the air. The Vorkarian guards, confused and disoriented, opened fire on the phantoms, allowing Michael and the prisoners to slip past. A sudden surge of power coursed through the facility. The engineer cried out, "I bypassed the lockdown, but..." The system rerouted power, life support. "It's offline in the holding cells." Michael froze, his face a mask of anguish. He knew what that meant. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of prisoners still trapped in the facility were now condemned to die. He clenched his fist clenched. There was no time, he had to make a choice. "Keep moving," he roared, his voice cracking with emotion. "We can't save them all, we have to get out." The group pressed on, their faces etched with guilt and horror. They reached the designated extraction point, a small docking bay with a single escape pod. But as they approached, the doors hissed open, revealing not freedom but a squad of heavily armed Vorkarian reinforcements. They were surrounded. Suddenly, Anya's sister gasped, her eyes flickering open. She stared at them, her gaze unfocused, then at Anya, a faint smile on her lips. "Tunnels," she whispered, her voice a mere breath. "Specimen tunnels, only way." With a final sigh, her eyes closed and she went still. Michael didn't hesitate. "The tunnels. Anya, lead the way." They plunged into the darkness of the specimen tunnels, leaving behind the false promise of the docking bay. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the cloying sweetness of artificial nutrients. The tunnels were narrow and claustrophobic, the walls slick with moisture. Strange, bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow, revealing grotesque shapes lurking in the shadows. As they moved deeper, they began to see them the specimens. Genetically modified creatures, twisted and warped by Vorkarian science. Some were vaguely familiar, resembling animals from Earth, but others were utterly alien, their bodies a horrifying fusion of flesh and metal. They were kept in stasis fields, their eyes vacant and unseeing. Suddenly, Anya stopped, her face pale with dread. "This is it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The schematics. The tunnel is sealed. There's no way out." The beam of Michael's makeshift torch, cobbled together from a discarded power cell and focusing lens, jittered across the slick, algae-covered walls. The air hung thick and heavy, a miasma of damp earth and something acrid, something manufactured. They moved cautiously, Anya's breathing ragged, the engineer, Ben, fiddling nervously with his data pad. The specimen tunnels. Each step echoed unnaturally in the confined space, amplifying the drip, drip, drip of water that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The beam caught on a glint of metal, a security camera, its lens clouded with grime but undeniably present. Then another and another, spaced intermittently along the tunnel's length, their silent eyes watching. Whispers and skitters echoed from the darkness ahead. This wasn't just a storage space. It was a prison, a laboratory, a testing ground. Michael moved to the front, his senses on high alert. Years of patching up busted ships in the black had honed his instincts, teaching him to read the subtle shifts in air pressure, the almost imperceptible vibrations that telegraphed danger. He touched the wall, feeling the cold, clammy stone beneath his fingers. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the dripping water. "And watch your step." Lita whimpered softly, her antennae twitching. She tugged on Michael's sleeve, pointing with a trembling finger towards a side passage barely wider than her shoulders. "Bad things," she rasped, her voice still permeated with the Vorkarian clicks and whistles she hadn't quite purged. "Hiding, waiting." Anya stumbled, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, darted around the tunnel. I can feel them," she choked out, her voice thick with grief. The things they did to my people, it's all here." But despite the obvious torment, she pressed on, her heart set strong. Stopping the Vorkarians was the only thing anchoring her to sanity. The tunnels narrowed, the walls pressing in on either side. They were forced to proceed single file, their vulnerability amplified by the claustrophobic space. The air grew heavier, the smell more acrid, burning at the back of their throats. Suddenly, a guttural growl echoed from the darkness. A creature, vaguely canine but twisted and grotesque, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with predatory hunger, emerged from the shadows. It fixated on Anya, its snarl deepening, saliva dripping from its fangs. It was drawn to her grief, feeding on her despair. Before Michael could react, the creature lunged. He shoved Anya aside, throwing himself in front of her. The creature's claws raked across his armor, tearing a long gash. He roared, a primal sound of defiance, and banged his head into the creature's snout. It recoiled, momentarily stunned. "Get back!" He yelled at Anya, his eyes blazing with a fierce protectiveness she hadn't seen before. He was no longer just a mechanic, a reluctant caretaker. He was her shield. Ben, his face pale, frantically worked at his datapad. "I've got something," he stammered. "Schematics, these tunnels. They're designed to flood with a toxic gas. A security measure. If we trigger an alarm." He trailed off, the implication hanging heavy in the air. They found a control panel recessed into the wall, a tangle of wires and flickering lights. A small screen displayed a complex sequence of symbols, a bypass code that would allow them to reroute the ventilation system. "I can crack it," Ben said, his voice tight with concentration. "But I need time." A tremor ran through the tunnel, dust rained down from the ceiling. "They know we're here," Michael said grimly. They're sealing off sections. He pointed his makeshift torch down the tunnel. Ben, work fast. Anya, Lita, watch our backs. The engineer's fingers flew across the datapad, lines of code scrolling across the screen. Outside the tunnel, the sounds of Vorkarian activity grew louder, the metallic clang of sealing doors echoing ominously. Finally, Ben exhaled sharply. Got it, rerouting ventilation now. He hit a button. The screen flickered, then went blank. A klaxon blared, deafening in the confined space. Red lights flashed. Too late, Michael growled. They're on to us. A massive shape lumbered into view, blocking the tunnel ahead. This creature was different, far larger and more imposing than the first. Its hide was thick and armored, its eyes cold and reptilian. Lita strained, her antennae twitching, but this time nothing. I can't, she whispered, her voice filled with fear. It's shielded, my abilities. They don't work. The creature roared, a sound that vibrated through their bones, and charged. There was no escape, no hiding. They had to fight. Anya drew her sidearm, her hands shaking but her eyes filled with a burning dedication. Ben scrambled for cover behind a stack of crates. Michael ripped a metal pipe from the wall, twisting it into a makeshift club. The creature swiped at Michael with a clawed hand, sending him sprawling. Anya fired, but the shots bounced harmlessly off its armored hide. The creature turned its attention to her, its eyes narrowing. Michael scrambled to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He saw a jagged piece of metal protruding from the wall, a broken support beam. An idea sparked in his mind. He grabbed the metal, wrenching it free. It was sharp, wickedly so. He charged, dodging the creature's attacks, and plunged the makeshift weapon into its exposed underbelly. The creature shrieked, a high-pitched, agonizing sound, and collapsed. The tunnel shook with the force of its fall. Anya pointed down a side passage. "Markings," she said, her voice hoarse. "Vorkarian emergency exit symbols." This way, they sprinted down the passage, their hopes rising. The passage opened into a wider chamber, and before them a heavy metal door. Anya reached for the release lever. "Wait," Michael shouted. He saw it then, the telltale glint of metal, the faint hum of energy weapons. Vorkarian soldiers waiting in ambush. It was a trap. Before anyone could react, Lita darted forward. She unleashed a wave of energy, a blinding flash of light, and a deafening roar that echoed through the chamber. The Vorkarian soldiers staggered back, momentarily stunned. "Go," she yelled, her voice filled with a desperate urgency. "I'll hold them off." Michael hesitated, his heart pounding. He couldn't leave her, but he knew she was right. They had to escape to warn the others. He grabbed Anya's arm and dragged her towards a narrow opening in the wall, a maintenance access panel. Ben followed close behind. They squeezed through the opening, finding themselves in a dark, cramped maintenance area. The sounds of gunfire and Lita's desperate cries echoed behind them. They were safe. For now. But Lita was gone. The echo of the energy blast still rang in their ears. They huddled deeper within the shadowed alcove of the maintenance area, catching their breath. Anya, face streaked with grime and tears, pressed a hand to her side. "It's my fault," she gasped, her voice tight with remorse. "I wasn't strong enough. I couldn't hold them back." Michael knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "No," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Don't say that. We knew it was a risk. Now we focus on getting her back." He scanned their surroundings, his gaze sharp and assessing. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of coolant and the low hum of machinery. The maintenance area was a sprawling depot crammed with half-disassembled components and diagnostic equipment. Cables snaked across the floor like metallic vines, and flickering holographic displays cast an eerie glow. "What is this place?" Anya asked, her voice barely a whisper. The engineer, a wiry man with grease-stained fingers, stepped forward, his eyes wide. This is a repair depot," he stammered, pointing to a series of complex schematics projected onto a nearby wall. "For specialized Vorkarian drones. I recognize these designs. I used to work on them." He approached the schematics, tracing a finger along a glowing blue line. Wait, there's something else. A hidden passage, a network of tunnels accessible through the drone repair bays. I thought they were just maintenance access, but Michael's eyes lit up. Can we use them? Potentially, the engineer replied, but their heavily guarded sensor locked everything. Michael circled one of the drone repair bays. The drones, how are they controlled? Remotely, the engineer said. A central control system within the facility. Why? Michael glanced at Anya. A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. Anya, can you? Anya winced, her face pale. I'm drained, but maybe if I can just get a connection. Don't push yourself, Michael cautioned. I have to try, she insisted, her voice strained. While Anya focused, drawing ragged breaths as she attempted to establish a connection, Michael and the engineer huddled over the drone schematics. These drones, Michael said, pointing to a diagram, they're equipped with cloaking devices. Yes, for stealth reconnaissance, the engineer confirmed, and limited offensive capabilities, small energy pulse emitters mostly for defense. A low, rhythmic thumping echoed through the maintenance area. They're searching the sector, the engineer said, his voice tight with fear. They'll be here soon. Anya gasped, her body convulsing slightly. I have something, a connection. It's weak, unstable. Michael looked up, his face grim. We don't have much time. He grabbed a handful of spare parts from a nearby workbench, a power regulator, a focusing lens, a handful of microchips. Can we enhance the cloak, add some kind of distraction device? The engineer nodded, his fingers flying across a holographic interface. I can reroute power to the cloaking field, increase its efficiency, and I can rig a sonic emitter to create a localized disruption field, enough to confuse their sensors for a few seconds. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a lone Vorkarian maintenance worker, clad in a grease-stained uniform, his face etched with weariness. He seemed oblivious to the ongoing search, his eyes downcast. He shuffled closer, muttering to himself in guttural Vorkarian. Michael tensed, ready to fight. The worker stopped, looked up, and met Michael's gaze. I know what you're doing, he said, his voice low and raspy. I've seen enough. Enough of the horrors they inflict in the name of genetic purity. The modifications. The culling, he shuddered. I can't be a part of it anymore. Michael lowered his weapon slightly, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. What do you want? To help, the worker said. I have access codes. Information, I know where they've taken the Runt, a high-security research lab, level 7. He fumbled in his pocket and produced a small data chip. This contains the lab's access codes, security protocols, everything. Michael took the chip, his mind racing. Can you get us inside? The worker shook his head. Not directly, but I know of a weakness in the lab's security grid, a blind spot in their sensor array. The drone can exploit it. Anya groaned, her connection wavering. I can guide you through the facility. Use the drone's visuals. Michael nodded to the engineer, who quickly loaded the access codes onto the modified drone. He then turned back to Anya. Take us there. Anya closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. On a nearby screen, the drone's camera flickered to life, displaying a grainy, infrared image of a sterile, white corridor. Turn left, then right. Bypass the thermal sensor. They moved through the Vorkarian facility, guided by Anya's strained voice and the drone's flickering camera. The tension was almost unbearable. Finally, Anya spoke, her voice barely audible. There, the lab, I see her. On the screen, a chilling image appeared. Lida strapped to a metal table, her small body dwarfed by the imposing machinery surrounding her. Vorkarian scientists, clad in sterile suits, hovered over her, their faces obscured by masks. They were preparing a long, needle-like instrument. They're going to start, Anya whispered, her voice choked with horror. They're going to experiment on her. Michael's fist clenched. Now. He gripped the drone control, his heart pounding in his chest. But just as he was about to initiate the infiltration sequence, the drone's feed cut out. The screen went black. Anya screamed, her body arching in pain. I lost it, They blocked the signal. A piercing alarm blared through the facility, its shrill tone echoing through the corridors. Red lights flashed, bathing the maintenance area in an ominous glow. Lockdown initiated, the engineer whispered, his face white with terror. They know we're here. Lita was in imminent danger. Michael's arms were around Lita before the restraints fully retracted, pulling her close against his chest. Her small body trembled against him, but her 3 eyes were wide, darting around the chaotic scene. Anya status, he barked, his voice tight with urgency. Anya, sweat beading on her forehead, fingers flying across the makeshift console, snapped, Almost. Got it. I've got a partial connection to one of the maintenance bots. Low-level access, but it's something. The disillusioned Vorkarian worker, his face etched with a mixture of fear and purpose, gestured wildly. This way. The main security checkpoints will be swarming soon. There are older, disused passages deeper in the facility. They're not on any official maps. A klaxon blared, a deafening, guttural sound that vibrated through the metal floor. Red lights pulsed, bathing the maintenance area in an ominous glow. Lockdown initiated, a cold, mechanical voice announced over the comm system. All personnel report to designated security stations. Unauthorized access detected in Sector Gamma 9. Too late, Anya gasped, severing the connection to the compromised drones. They've sealed off this entire section. They followed the worker, his bulky Vorkarian frame surprisingly agile as he navigated the narrow corridors. They reached a maintenance hatch, barely large enough for Michael to squeeze through while carrying Lita. The worker punched in a sequence on a corroded keypad, and the hatch hissed open, revealing a dark, cramped tunnel. This leads to the old service network, he explained, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not pretty, but it's the only way out now. Anya pointed to her console. The drone feed is patchy, but it's better than nothing. I can see about 20 meters ahead. The image on the screen flickered, showing a dimly lit tunnel, the metal walls stained with rust and grime. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming small puddles on the floor. They moved cautiously, Anya leading the way, her eyes glued to the drone feed. The tunnels twisted and turned, branching off in multiple directions. Flooding ahead, she warned, her voice strained. And structural damage, proceed with caution. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the tunnel. Seeker drones, Anya yelled. They're deploying specialized units into the maintenance tunnels. Michael cursed under his breath. Anya, can you scramble their signals? I can try, but it'll take time, she replied, her fingers dancing across the console. And I'm not feeling so great. This connection is draining me. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. He looked at the disabled drone they'd salvaged earlier, lying discarded in a corner. An idea sparked in his mind. I might have something, cover me. He quickly set to work, stripping wires and components from the drone, his fingers moving with practiced speed. I'm turning this hunk of junk into a makeshift imp. It's not pretty, but it might buy us some time. Anya gasped, clutching her head. They're getting closer. I can barely maintain the connection. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a reinforced door sealed shut. A complex security panel glowed beside it. Dead end, Michael said grimly. The Vorkarian worker swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously. There's an abandoned research lab nearby. It's not on any official maps, but I know where it is. They used to store outdated security access tools there. Can you get us in? Michael asked, his voice sharp. The worker hesitated, then nodded. I can try, but it's heavily guarded. They reached the lab, a cavernous chamber filled with decaying equipment and flickering emergency lights. The air hung thick with the smell of ozone and decay. Dust motes danced in the weak light. Michael worked frantically, connecting wires and rerouting power to the ancient security access tools. Sparks flew and the air crackled with energy. Almost got it. Anya, leaning against a wall, her face ashen, fired her plasma pistol at the tunnel entrance. The The seeker drones, small, spider-like machines, skittered through the darkness, their red eyes glowing menacingly. She used the environment to her advantage, collapsing sections of the tunnel with well-aimed shots, creating obstacles and slowing their advance. The Vorkarian worker paced nervously, his gaze flickering between Michael and the entrance. He knew that if they were caught, his family would suffer the consequences. He was betraying his people, his entire way of life. "Got it," Michael shouted, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "I've got a temporary override code. It won't last long, but it's enough to open the door." As they turned to leave the lab, a squad of heavily armed Vorkarian soldiers, led by a towering commander in gleaming black armor, blocked their path. The commander's face was grim, his eyes cold and calculating. "The Runt," the commander said, his voice a low growl. "We have been searching for you, and the human traitor." He turned his gaze towards Lita, and his expression changed subtly. "You possess unique genetic markers, little one, markers that could be used to develop specialized biological applications. Your existence is valuable." The disillusioned worker stepped forward, his face a mask of anguish. "No, she is not a weapon, she is a life." He lunged forward, throwing himself in front of the commander's plasma rifle. A searing blast ripped through the air, engulfing the worker in a cloud of superheated plasma. He crumpled to the ground, his body smoking. With his last breath, he looked at Michael and Anya, his eyes pleading. "Save the planet." Michael, stunned by the worker's sacrifice, grabbed Anya's arm and pulled her towards the tunnel entrance. "Move now." They plunged into the darkness, Lita clutched tightly in Michael's arms. Behind them, they heard the roar of plasma fire and the shouts of pursuing soldiers. They ran blindly, deeper and deeper into the unexplored tunnels. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. A deafening rumble echoed through the tunnels. The ceiling cracked and chunks of rock and metal rained down around them. "Collapse!" Anya screamed. "Get out!" They scrambled forward, desperate to escape the collapsing tunnel. Just as they reached a narrow opening, the tunnel behind them gave way, burying the passage in tons of debris. They were trapped. They stumbled forward into a section of the tunnel that seemed untouched by the collapse. The air was thick with a strange, earthy smell. Bioluminescent fungi glowed softly, illuminating the walls with an ethereal light. Strange markings, unlike anything Michael had ever seen, adorned the walls, hinting at a previous civilization that had once inhabited these tunnels. A civilization lost to time. The air hung thick and humid, clinging to Michael's skin like a second layer. He knelt beside Anya, the faint bioluminescence of the fungi casting an eerie green glow on her face. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. The neural implant embedded in her temple flickered erratically, a dying star in the dim light. "How bad is it?" he asked, his voice tight. Anya managed a weak smile. "Terminal, I'm afraid. The sustained damage, the lack of proper medical attention. Without specialized equipment, there's nothing to be done. But," she added, her grip tightening on his arm, "I can still function for a little while longer." Michael ran a hand over his face, frustration gnawing at him. They were so close to something that could help them all. He needed to buy her time. Lita, her large eyes scanning the cavern, tilted her head. "The lights," she said, pointing to the bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls and ceiling. "They sing." Michael frowned. "Sing? An energy," Anya rasped. "I can feel it too, and Vorkarian." Michael pulled out his scanner, a battered piece of human tech he'd modified countless times. He aimed it at the fungi. The reading spiked. "She's right, the fungi. It's emitting a unique energy signature, one detectable by Vorkarian technology." "Could it help?" Michael asked. Anya coughed, a rattling sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "Perhaps. A temporary stabilization. The energy might bridge the failing circuits in my implant. But it would require direct contact." Lita took a step closer to the fungi, her antennae twitched. "It resonates," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "With me." Michael watched her, a flicker of hope igniting within him. This strange alien child, was she the key? He pushed the thought aside for now. Survival first, questions later. He carefully began to harvest the fungi, using a scavenged piece of plasteel to scrape it from the wall. The fungi pulsed with a soft, inner light as it was removed, leaving a faint, shimmering trail. Using more scavenged parts, Michael fashioned a makeshift applicator, a small pad connected to a rudimentary power source. It was crude, but it was all he had. He gently pressed the pad against Anya's implant. For a moment nothing happened. Then the implant flickered, stabilized, and glowed with a steady green light. Anya gasped, her breathing evening out. "It's working," she said, her voice stronger. "I can think clearly." But the effect was short-lived. Within minutes, the implant began to flicker again, the green light fading. Anya's breathing grew labored. "It's fading, too weak." Defeated, Michael slumped back against the cavern wall. He looked around, desperate for another solution. His gaze fell upon the tunnel walls, covered in strange markings, half obscured by the fungi. "What are those?" he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Anya, her strength returning slightly, focused her gaze. "Ancient carvings depicting beings." She coughed again. "Like Vorkarians and humans." Michael moved closer, his heart quickening. The carvings showed figures that were unmistakably Vorkarian, but with a softer, more rounded features. And beside them, figures that resembled humans, but taller, more slender. They were coexisting peacefully, working together. Further down the tunnel, a faint hum resonated through the rock. "There," Anya said, pointing with a trembling hand. "A chamber." They moved slowly, cautiously, Lita leading the way. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a massive piece of technology, humming with power, its surface covered in glowing runes. The bioluminescent fungi grew in abundance here, their light bathing the chamber in an ethereal glow. "What is it?" Michael breathed, awestruck. "A bioscanner," Anya said, her voice filled with wonder. "Ancient, pre-collapse, it could potentially repair my implant if we can recalibrate it." But the chamber was not empty. Strange, genetically modified creatures lurked in the shadows. Their bodies were twisted and distorted, their eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. They were unlike anything Michael had ever seen. The scanners couldn't even register their presence. "They don't like us being here," Lita whispered, fear evident in her voice. "We need to lure them away from the scanner," Michael said, his mind racing. "Sound, light, something to distract them." He grabbed a piece of metal and slammed it against the rock wall, creating a sharp, echoing clang. Lita, understanding his plan, amplified the sound with a focused burst of energy. The creatures stirred, their glowing eyes focusing on the source of the noise. Working together, Michael and Lita created a series of distractions, luring the creatures deeper into the tunnels. Anya, meanwhile, struggled to reach the bioscanner, her every movement a testament to her failing strength. Finally, she reached the machine. Her fingers danced across the controls, her mind racing to decipher the ancient runes. Almost there," she muttered. "I've recalibrated the machine, but it needs a genetic sample," Anya said, her voice strained. "A Vorkarian sample with specific markers." Lita froze. Her eyes darted from Anya to Michael, her expression a mixture of fear and uncertainty. "My DNA? It's the only way," Anya said, her voice pleading. "It needs your genetic code to complete the recalibration, to fix my implant." Lita hesitated, revealing her genetic information. It was a risk, a huge risk. What if Anya betrayed her? What if the bioscanner revealed something dangerous? Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the tunnel. The ground vibrated. "Drones," Michael said, his voice grim. "Vorkarian patrol drones. They've breached the tunnel collapse." The drones emitted high-frequency scanning pulses, sweeping through the tunnels. The pulses overloaded the bioluminescent fungi, causing them to flicker violently and emit a blinding flash of light. The modified creatures, disoriented and agitated, turned back towards the chamber, their glowing eyes filled with rage. Chaos erupted. In that moment, Lita made her decision. She looked at Anya, her eyes filled with a newfound determination. "Trust," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She stepped forward and extended her hand, offering a single drop of her Vorkarian blood. Anya took it, her fingers trembling. She inserted the sample into the bioscanner. The machine hummed, its runes glowing brighter. The scanner analyzed Lita's DNA, its beam tracing the complex patterns of her genetic code. Then it stopped. A hidden sequence, buried deep within Lita's DNA, had been revealed. A sequence linked to the ancient civilization, to the fungi, to something far greater than anything they could have imagined. The bioscanner initiated a system-wide search. The runes glowed with blinding intensity. Dormant defense mechanisms, hidden within the tunnel system, began to activate. The chamber shook. The ground trembled. Something was awakening. The tunnel system thrummed, a low, resonant vibration that resonated in Michael's teeth. Then, with a flash of cerulean light, energy shields slammed into existence, sectioning off the tunnel into a deadly maze. The air crackled with static. "Damn it!" Anya spat, her voice tight. "They're trying to box us in." Almost as if in response, automated defense turrets whirred to life, emerging from hidden recesses in the walls. Their barrels glowed red, then spat a hail of plasma bolts. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burning rock. Michael dove for cover, pulling Lita and Anya down with him. "They're targeting movement," he yelled over the din. "Stay low." He scanned the tunnel markings, his mind racing. The glyphs weren't just decorative, they were a map, a predictive algorithm. He saw the turret patterns, the blind spots, the fleeting moments of safety. This way, now. He scrambled forward, weaving through the deadly crossfire, Lita and Anya close behind. Lita whimpered, a high-pitched keening that vibrated in Michael's chest. "It's okay, Lita," he gasped, "just a little further." Lita tugged at his sleeve, her large eyes wide with fear. But then her expression changed, her brow furrowing in concentration. She pointed to the left. "Energy flows there." Michael hesitated, then trusted her instinct. He veered left, squeezing through a narrow gap just as a turret swiveled, its plasma bolt scorching the wall where they'd been moments before. Anya stumbled, clutching her head. "The bioscanner. It's helping. My perception is clearer." Her voice was stronger, more focused. They pressed on, Lita guiding them through the labyrinthine tunnels, Michael interpreting the glyphs, Anya's mind sharpening with each passing moment. Then, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. In the center stood a crystalline structure, pulsing with an inner light. It resonated with Lita's DNA, a harmonic vibration that filled the chamber. The crystal projected a holographic image, a figure that was both Vorkarian and human, their features seamlessly blended. The hologram spoke, its voice echoing in both Vorkarian and broken English. "We were symbionts, the fungi, our protectors, the tunnels, our legacy." The figure faded, leaving behind a profound silence. The fungi, Michael realized, weren't just a passive part of the environment. They were a sentient network, guarding the tunnels, the knowledge, the very essence of this lost civilization. On the surface, the Vorkarian patrol ship registered the energy surge from the tunnel activation. Alarms blared on the bridge. "Source located," the sensor officer reported. "Tunnel system beneath grid Gamma 7. The Vorkarian commander, his face a mask of cold commitment, snarled, "They're cornered, seal the entrance, full-scale assault. Collateral damages, acceptable," Michael cursed. "They know where we are." He studied the energy shields. "Damn it, they're directional, protect from the front but vulnerable from the sides." Lita reached out, her hand hovering over the crystalline structure. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "I can feel them, the shields. I can move them." With a grunt of effort, she manipulated the energy flow, creating temporary openings, diverting the Vorkarian fire. It was a desperate gamble, but it bought them precious seconds. "There." Anya pointed to a darkened passage. "A hidden route to the surface, but it's blocked." A heavily reinforced blast door sealed the passage, its surface scarred with ancient battle damage. Michael examined the control panel. It needs a Vorkarian command code, something I definitely don't have. Anya shook her head. I don't remember it. The neural implant is still damaged. Lita stepped forward, her small hand outstretched. She closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then she projected a series of complex Vorkarian glyphs, shimmering in the air before the control panel. They were alien, intricate, yet somehow familiar. The blast door groaned, then slowly began to open. Just as the gap widened enough to squeeze through, the Vorkarian patrol breached the tunnel entrance. Plasma fire ripped through the air. Go! Michael roared, shoving Lita and Anya towards the opening. I'll cover you. He grabbed a discarded plasma rifle, firing wildly, drawing the Vorkarian fire away from the women. He was a mechanic, not a soldier, but he would be damned if he let them capture Lita. As Lita and Anya scrambled through the partially opened blast door, a grenade sailed through the air, landing perilously close to the crystalline structure. Boom! The explosion rocked the chamber, sending shards of crystal flying. The crystalline structure destabilized, its energy matrix collapsing. A surge of raw power erupted, creating a chain reaction throughout the tunnel system. The walls buckled, the energy shields flickered and died, and the air crackled with uncontrolled energy. Michael was caught in the blast, the tunnel collapsing around him. The last thing he saw was Lita's terrified face before darkness consumed him. Anya yanked Lita backward, the air thick with the metallic tang of disturbed dust and the acrid scent of ozone. Chunks of the tunnel ceiling rained down where they'd stood moments before, the crystalline structures groaning under the strain. Lita, move. They stumbled over fallen debris, reaching Michael. He was a horrifying tableau, unconscious, his body pinned beneath a lattice of shimmering crystals that had pierced his suit and impossibly seemed to be growing into his flesh. The crystalline structure pulsed with a faint, internal light, mirroring the erratic flicker of his helmet display. Anya's fingers flew across her wrist-mounted diagnostics. Damn it, his life support is failing, pressure dropping, internal bleeding. He doesn't have long. Her voice was tight with panic, a stark contrast to her usual stoicism. Lita knelt beside Michael, her multifaceted eyes wide with concern. A low hum resonated from her throat, and she reached out a tentative hand toward the crystalline growth. The fungi, it calls. Her voice was barely a whisper, permeated with an alien resonance. It can. Help. Anya grabbed Lita's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. No, Lita, we don't know what that thing is. Merging him further with it could be catastrophic. The light from Anya's headlamp glinted off the sweat beading on her brow. Above them, the rumble of approaching footsteps echoed through the tunnel. A harsh, guttural voice crackled over the Vorkarian comms, barely audible but unmistakable. Locate the Runt and the human traitor. Capture is preferable, but termination is authorized. Tunnel integrity is secondary. The ground trembled as another series of seismic charges detonated further down the tunnel. More of the crystalline structure collapsed, showering them with dust and debris. Escape routes were closing. Anya cursed under her breath. We're out of time. Lita, we need to move now. Lita stared at Mikano, her face a mask of dedication. No, I can. I can create a safe place. A shield. She closed her eyes, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. It will be risky, Anya, very risky. Ignoring Anya's protests, Lita reached out and touched the crystalline structure. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural light. A wave of energy pulsed outward from her, and the surrounding crystals began to glow brighter, resonating with her life force. Images flooded her mind. Vast, subterranean networks, the rise and fall of an ancient civilization, the slow, deliberate pulse of the living rock. Knowledge poured into her, overwhelming, exhilarating, terrifying. With a guttural cry, Lita began to manipulate the crystalline structure. Tendrils of energy snaked out from her hands, weaving and shaping the crystals into a protective cocoon around Michael. The process was agonizing, draining her strength with each passing second. Her body trembled, her skin clammy with sweat. Anya, despite her reservations, worked feverishly, connecting a salvaged Vorkarian bio-monitor to Michael's suit. His vitals are stabilizing, but only just. Lita, hurry. Anya's voice was tight with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The crystalline cocoon shimmered, deflecting falling debris. But the tremors were growing stronger, and the heat signatures of approaching Vorkarian troops were closing in on their location, painting a grim picture on Anya's scanner. Michael stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He coughed, his voice weak and raspy. "Lita, Anya, get out of here." He struggled to focus, his gaze unfocused. "The commander, he won't stop." Then a flicker of something else crossed his face, a strange, distant awareness. The homeworld, the shield, it's weak, in the north. The vision faded and he lapsed back into unconsciousness, but the words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lita, her face pale but resolute, absorbed Michael's fragmented vision. A plan began to form in her mind, audacious and desperate. "Anya, I know where to strike. I know how to hurt them." Anya, ever practical, grabbed a discarded Vorkarian grenade from a fallen soldier. "Then let's give them a little surprise." Working quickly, she used her multi-tool to interface with the grenade's circuitry, rerouting its energy matrix using principles gleaned from the tunnel's technology. This should disrupt their comms, at least for a while. Lita, guided by the fungi's knowledge of the tunnels, led Anya to a narrow choke point. They set the modified grenade, rigging it to detonate as the Vorkarian troops approached. "Now," Lita whispered, her voice barely audible above the rumbling of the tunnel, "we run." The grenade detonated with a flash of blue light, bathing the tunnel in an eerie glow. The Vorkarian troops, caught in the blast, stumbled and cried out in confusion as their comms went dead. Anya and Lita slipped past them, disappearing deeper into the labyrinthine tunnel system, leaving their pursuers disoriented and vulnerable. The Vorkarian commander watched the chaotic scene unfold on his helmet display, his mandibles clicking in fury. "Find them. Eliminate them both. The Runt is a threat, and the human will pay for his defiance." His voice was a venomous hiss, filled with a promise of retribution. As they fled, Lita felt her connection to the fungi network growing stronger, her senses expanding. She could feel the vibrations of the tunnel, the flow of energy through the crystals, the presence of the Vorkarian troops closing in behind them. She was becoming one with the tunnel, and the tunnel was becoming a weapon. The tunnels, once symbols of oppression, now pulsed with the energy of liberation. Lita and Anya's sabotage had thrown the Vorkarian troops into disarray. Explosions echoed through the city, communication lines were severed, and the rigid formations of the loyalist forces crumbled into pockets of isolated resistance. The disruption was palpable, a wave of confusion washing over the enemy ranks. Anya, her face streaked with grime but her eyes blazing with persistence, emerged from the tunnel network alongside Lita. Behind them surged the Vorkarian rebels, a tide of green armor and repurposed weaponry, their roars echoing through the shattered streets. This was it, the final assault on the Vorkarian command center. From within the command center, the Vorkarian commander, his face a mask of cold fury, issued his orders. "Full-scale attack, crush the rebellion, civilian casualties are acceptable." His voice, amplified across the city's remaining comm channels, sent a chilling wave of fear through the Vorkarian citizens, a stark reminder of the regime's ruthlessness. Lita closed her eyes, focusing. The commander's tactics, once veiled in strategic complexity, now unfolded before her like a child's game. "They're massing troops at the western gate," she announced, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "Anya, divert 2 squads to intercept." Michael anticipated this. The fungi network can reroute power to amplify their shield. "Tell them to expect a sonic blast." In a secure location, amidst flickering screens and sparking consoles, Michael, his arm in a makeshift sling, worked feverishly. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he navigated the complex interface of the captured Vorkarian comm system. He was a ghost in the machine, a human mind dancing through the alien code. "Tell Anya," he rasped, wincing in pain. "The commander is preparing a counterattack focusing on the eastern flank. They're using a modified energy weapon. I'm sending the frequency adjustment. Now." The Vorkarian rebels, guided by Lita's prescience and Michael's technical expertise, fought with a ferocity born of desperation and hope. They breached the outer defenses of the command center, storming through corridors and engaging in brutal close-quarters combat with the remaining loyalist forces. Energy weapons flashed, blades clashed, and the air filled with the guttural cries of Vorkarian warriors. Lita, her movements fluid and precise, reached the command deck. Before her stood the Vorkarian commander, his eyes burning with fanaticism. "It ends here, Runt," he snarled, raising his weapon. "It doesn't have to," Lita replied, her voice resonating with a quiet strength. "Your people are suffering. Your city is in ruins. End this madness. Embrace the future." The commander's face twisted in a mask of contempt. "The future? There is no future for genetic abominations. Only purity, only strength." He lunged forward, attempting to activate a failsafe device embedded in the command console. "I will cleanse this city, even if it means destroying everything." "No." Michael's voice boomed through the comm system, infused with urgency. "He's triggering the failsafe. It'll overload the city's power grid. I can reroute the fungi network, but I need time." His fingers danced across the console, lines of code cascading down the screen. He was fighting against time, against the commander's madness, against the imminent destruction of everything they had fought for. Lita saw the desperation in the commander's eyes, the unwavering belief in his twisted ideology. She knew words were useless. Empowered by the support of the rebels surging behind her and the vision of a new Vorkarian society, she moved with lightning speed. A swift strike, a disarm, and the commander fell defeated, his weapon clattering to the floor. Michael's voice crackled through the comms. "I did it. The failsafe is disabled. The city is safe." A collective cheer erupted from the rebels, a wave of relief washing over the battlefield. In the aftermath of the battle, Anya, working alongside rebel scientists, dedicated herself to refining Michael's research. Days turned into weeks as they labored tirelessly, fueled by hope and grit. Finally, the breakthrough came. Anya, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the laboratory equipment, announced, "We've done it. The gene therapy is complete. We can reverse the genetic culling permanently." The Vorkarian commander was imprisoned, his reign of terror finally over. A new council, comprised of Vorkarians from all walks of life, was established to lead the Vorkarian people towards a more inclusive and compassionate future. Lita, once deemed a worthless runt, became a symbol of hope and change, inspiring Vorkarians to embrace diversity and compassion. Her story became a legend, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of acceptance. Michael, healed from his injuries, found peace and purpose in his role as a mentor and guardian to Lita and an advisor to the new council. He had found a family, a purpose, and a way to atone for the tragedies of his past. The grief that had haunted him for so long began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of fulfillment. Years later, Michael and Lita stood side by side, overlooking the rebuilt Vorkarian city. The scars of the war were still visible, but they were overshadowed by the vibrant energy of a society reborn. The air hummed with the promise of a brighter future. "They'll be okay, Michael," Lita said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. "They're finally learning to see the value in everyone, not just the strong." Michael smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "They learned from the best." He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of love and pride. And it all started with a little runt cast aside in the cold of space. They stood in comfortable silence, gazing at the horizon, two unlikely allies, united by a bond that had changed a civilization. The Vorkarian sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. But in their hearts, there was only light, the unwavering light of hope, compassion, and the enduring power of the human spirit.